I'm Aaron. I'm 31. It was a Friday night, 8:12 p.m., and my parents' kitchen smelled like garlic bread and orange soda. The table was small, the lasagna was still warm, and there were three of us sitting with polite smiles that felt too thin. My mom had set out the good plates. My dad had carved a slice and was halfway through his first bite when he asked the easy question, "So how did you two meet?" Madison rolled her eyes before she answered. She had spent the day getting ready. Hair done, nails perfect, the kind of effort that makes you notice the details first. I remember the way she looked at my parents like she was sizing them up, like she already knew the score. Then she tapped her manicured nails on the edge of her glass and said, plain as if she'd been rehearsing it, "He's sweet, but honestly, I'm with him for comfort, money, gifts, that life." Silence fell hard. My father's fork paused above his plate. My mother let out a small sound and put her hand to her mouth. I felt something inside me go quiet and hollow at the same time. I don't like making scenes in front of my parents. I don't like letting anger take over. But this was different. This was not a careless comment. It was a choice put on display. "Wait," I said, low and steady. "What do you mean by that?" She laughed then. "Don't be naive," she said. "You know why I'm here. He gives me the kind of life I like. Why pretend otherwise?" My mother's eyes were bright. My father set his fork down slowly. I looked at Madison, at the way her jaw was set, and then at my parents, at the look of hurt that cut across my mother's face. In a flash, I saw 100 small things I'd done. Driving across town at midnight to pick up a broken phone, showing up with soup when she was sick, keeping quiet when she wanted to rant. None of those things meant anything in her voice. I felt like I'd been erased from every memory where I mattered. "Madison," my mother said, voice soft, "that's not how you talk about someone you know." She shrugged, and for a moment the room felt colder. "I'm just being honest," she said. "He's good for the lifestyle. That's the truth." I stood up then. The chair scraped the linoleum, and the sound seemed too loud in the suddenly still kitchen. My legs felt stiff. I followed her out into the hallway without thinking. The house was a narrow run of light and shadow. She crossed her arms and looked at me like I'd misunderstood everything. "You embarrassed me," she said. "You always care too much about what your parents think." "You embarrassed me?" I said. "You told them you use me." "It's not like we're married," she said. "Why are you overreacting?" Everything after that came fast and sharp. The argument was short sentences, each one trying to land harder than the last. "Maybe we want different things." "Fine, fine." The words were like doors being slammed one after another. She walked away first. I listened to her heels tap down the hall, the sound of her leaving as clear as a final decision. 2 minutes after she left, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I didn't pick it up right away. I stood in the dim hallway and replayed the dinner again. Her nails on the glass, my mother's face, the way my father had gone very still. I kept thinking of the small kindnesses that suddenly felt pointless. I kept thinking of the way she had said the words as if they were facts, like she had chosen them carefully because they would hurt the most. When I finally looked at the phone, it was a text. She had written one line. "I can't fake this. I need what I want." No explanation. No apology. Just a cold, simple sentence that felt like a closing paragraph. I left the message unread for a long time. Then I put the phone in my pocket and sat back at the table, staring at the lasagna my mother had covered with foil. She came into the kitchen with a small towel and, without saying anything, took the dish from the stove and set it back in front of me. Her hand brushed mine for a beat, a quiet anchor in a room that had lost its balance. I knew that night had changed things. I didn't know how far the change would go, only that something had been broken and that the next steps would demand choices I hadn't expected to make. 2 weeks later, Madison packed her things and left. It was a Tuesday afternoon, quiet. She didn't make a scene or say goodbye. She just left behind a silk robe draped across the couch and a half-used candle by the sink. I came home from work and saw the empty spaces where her things used to be. The perfume on the counter, her favorite mug by the window, the jacket she never hung properly. I stood there for a while, just looking around. The silence felt heavier than any argument we ever had. That night, I took one photo, sunlight cutting through the blinds onto the empty couch, and posted it with no caption. I wasn't trying to make a statement, but somehow people understood. Friends messaged me. Some said, "Sorry, man." Others said, "You dodged a bullet." I didn't feel sorry or lucky. I just felt flat. Madison, on the other hand, posted a picture that same evening. She was at brunch with some new guy, designer bag in view, mimosa in hand, captioned "Fresh Starts." I saw it and didn't react. Maybe part of me was too tired to care. Days passed slowly after that. My parents called often, checking in, inviting me over for dinner. I started spending more time at work, not because I loved it, but because it gave my mind something else to focus on. When you're hurt, you try to stay busy. It's easier than feeling everything at once. 6 months went by. Madison was still somewhere in the background of my social media feed, smiling beside a man with a red Mercedes. They took pictures at rooftop bars and restaurants I couldn't pronounce. From the outside, she looked happy, glowing, expensive, untouchable. But then I noticed something small in one of her videos. The phone on the table lit up with a text, and she flipped it over, face down, fast. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it meant everything. People told me little bits of gossip. Someone said she and the new guy fought often. Someone else said he was controlling. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I'd already learned that the truth always comes around on its own. In the quiet evenings, I started rebuilding myself. I cleaned my apartment, donated her leftover things, fixed small things I had been ignoring. I ate dinner alone at the kitchen counter and thought about how my father once said, "You learn more from silence than shouting." He was right. Breakups don't happen in one big explosion. They happen through small, quiet collapses. The night she laughed at that dinner didn't just end our relationship. It exposed what it had always been built on. I replayed that moment in my mind, her tapping nails, my dad's stillness, my mom's hurt eyes, until the anger drained out, leaving behind a strange kind of calm. Months after that dinner, life had started to steady. I was sleeping better, smiling more often, and even seeing friends again. I thought Madison was just another closed chapter. Then one cold Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. Her name appeared on the screen, Madison. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, unsure if I should even open it. Then I did. "Hey Aaron, I know this is weird, but can we talk? Please." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just a request. I sat there for a full minute, reading the message again and again. The woman who once laughed at my job in front of my parents was now reaching out, her tone softer, unsure. I could have ignored it. I probably should have. But curiosity, the same kind that gets you to look inside a wound, made me hesitate. I wanted to know why. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same person who said she was with me only for the lifestyle now wanted to talk when hers started to crack. The next morning, I sent one short reply. Sure, coffee sometime. Not because I missed her, not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted closure, the kind that doesn't come from silence, but from seeing the person who once hurt you sit across the table, knowing the tables had turned. We met at the same cafe where we'd first gone on a date 2 years ago, the one with the hanging plants, dim lights, and jazz playing softly in the background. Back then, she'd sat across from me, talking about her dreams, laughing at every joke. But now, when I saw her walk in, she looked different. Not bad, just tired. Her hair was tied in a loose bun, and there were faint shadows under her eyes. She smiled when she saw me, that same practiced smile she used to give everyone, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. We ordered coffee. Hers, as usual, a caramel latte. Mine, just black. The silence between us was heavy, but not awkward. She was the first to speak. "I know I'm the last person you expected to hear from," she started, looking down at her cup. "I've been thinking about that dinner, about what I said. I was stupid. I hurt you, and your family, and I didn't even realize how awful it was until..." "Until what?" I asked, not coldly, just directly. She hesitated. "Until it happened to me." I didn't respond. She took a deep breath and continued, her voice trembling slightly. "The guy I was with, Adam, he treated me like a trophy. Expensive dinners, designer gifts, trips, but everything had a price. He'd say things like, 'You don't need to work, just look good next to me.' And I thought I was fine with it at first. But then he started making jokes about me, in front of his friends, about how I was lucky to have him, how I couldn't survive without him." Her voice cracked, and I just sat there, smiling, like it didn't hurt. "The same way you did that night." I didn't move. I just let her words hang there. She looked up at me, eyes glossy. "When he laughed about my job, or rather, my lack of one, I remembered that night at your parents' house. I saw my own reflection in his face, and I hated myself. That's when I knew what I'd done to you." I exhaled slowly. "So, you're here for what? An apology?" "No," she said quickly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it out loud. I needed you to know that I'm sorry." There was a pause, long, quiet, and strangely peaceful. I could feel years of tension loosen, just slightly. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "But I've already forgiven you. Not for you, for me." She nodded, eyes lowering again. "You always were the better one between us." I smiled faintly. "No, I just learned the hard way what respect actually looks like." We sat for a while longer, finishing our coffee. She told me she was planning to start over, maybe move back to her hometown, find a job, rebuild. For once, she sounded sincere. When we finally stood up to leave, she said, "You know, I still think about that night sometimes. Your dad didn't say much, but the way he looked at me, it still haunts me." I nodded. He doesn't hold grudges. But he remembers. She gave a sad smile. Guess I deserve that. I didn't respond. She walked out first, just like she did months ago, but this time there was no silence heavy with anger, only closure. As I stepped out of the cafe, the sun was setting, soft orange lights spilling over the street. I felt free. That evening, I went to my parents' house for dinner. My dad looked up from his newspaper and said, "You look lighter." I smiled. Yeah, I finally let go. He nodded slowly. Karma has a way of teaching lessons better than we ever could. And he was right. Madison's words that day weren't just an apology, they were karma's echo. The same laughter she once used to belittle me had come back to break her pride. As I sat with my family that night, laughing and eating in the same dining room where everything had once fallen apart, I realized something. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like payback. Sometimes it looks like peace. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want anything else. A year passed after that day in the cafe. Life had moved on, slowly, but beautifully. I had changed jobs, started my own small design studio, and was finally doing work I actually loved. My parents were proud, my friends said I seemed more grounded, and for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. But one random evening, as I was heading home from work, I saw her again. Madison. She was standing outside a grocery store, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, holding a bag of apples. No fancy car, no expensive handbag, just normal. She noticed me, and her expression froze for a moment before softening into a faint smile. "Aaron," she said, surprised. "Hey," I replied. "It's been a while." "Yeah," she said, looking down. "Almost a year." We talked briefly. She told me she'd moved back into a small apartment downtown, started working as a marketing assistant. "Not glamorous," she said, half smiling, "but it's honest." There was something different about her, not just in appearance, but in her tone. She spoke slower, humbler, as if life had stripped away the arrogance and replaced it with quiet understanding. "I heard about your company," she said softly. "You're doing well, huh?" "Trying to," I said. She nodded, then hesitated. "You deserve it, you know. Everything good that's happening to you. You earned it." I thanked her. She looked like she wanted to say more, but didn't. For a brief moment, I saw the woman I once loved. Not the one who mocked me, but the one who used to laugh at my bad jokes and dance barefoot in the kitchen. Then, just as quickly, the image faded. We said goodbye and went our separate ways. I walked home through the chilly air, feeling an odd mix of nostalgia and peace. I didn't hate her. I didn't pity her either. We were just two people who had outgrown what once broke us. Later that night, as I sat on my balcony sipping coffee, I got a message from her. "Thank you for being kind today. You didn't have to be." I smiled faintly, typed a reply. "Take care, Madison," and hit send. That was the last time we ever spoke. Months later, I heard she'd started volunteering at a local shelter for women trying to rebuild their lives. It made sense. Maybe she was trying to rebuild hers too. And that's when I realized something powerful. Karma doesn't just punish, it transforms. It teaches through loss, humbles through pain, and rebuilds through reflection. Madison had learned her lesson, and so had I. Mine was that dignity is louder than revenge. Years later, when people ask me why I never badmouthed her, I just smile and say, because life already handled it better than I ever could. And every time I remember that family dinner, her laughter, my dad's silence, my mom's disappointed eyes, I no longer feel anger. I just feel gratitude. Because that night, painful as it was, pushed me toward the man I was always supposed to become. The man who no longer needed to prove his worth to anyone, especially not to someone who couldn't see it in the first place. 5 years later, life had completely transformed. I was 33, running a successful creative agency with a small but loyal team. My parents had retired and moved closer to the countryside, and I visited them every weekend without fail. Peace, the kind I once thought I'd never have, had become my new normal. But life has a strange sense of timing. One Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hey, Aaron, this is Madison. I hope you're doing well." I blinked at the screen, surprised. I hadn't heard that name in years. For a moment, I thought of ignoring it, but curiosity tugged at me again. "Hi, Madison. I'm good. How about you?" Her reply came after a minute. "Could we talk? It's important." I hesitated but agreed. We met at a quiet park cafe. Not the same one as before, but something similar, tucked between trees, with the sound of kids laughing in the distance. When I saw her, my breath caught. She looked older, not in a bad way, just real. Her hair was shorter, streaked lightly with brown tones, and there was a calmness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She smiled softly when she saw me. "Hey, stranger," she said. "Hey," I replied, smiling politely. We ordered coffee and sat down. After some small talk, she finally exhaled. as if she'd been holding her breath for years. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not holding on to the bitterness. For not trying to ruin me, even though I deserved it." I tilted my head. "I never wanted to ruin you, Madison. I just wanted peace." She nodded slowly. "You got it. And you found success, too. I saw your interviews online. You're doing incredible things." I smiled faintly. "Thank you." Then she said something I didn't expect. "I'm married now. To someone kind." She smiled at the word. "He's not rich, not flashy. He's a teacher. But he's everything I used to think wasn't enough." I felt a genuine warmth hearing that. "I'm glad." "Really?" She looked at me then, eyes shining with quiet honesty. "You were right that night, at dinner. I didn't value what I had. I thought image mattered more than effort. But life showed me what real value looks like." Her words didn't sting this time. They healed something small that had been left open for years. We talked for almost an hour. She told me about her volunteer work, how she was mentoring young girls about self-worth and independence. "I guess I'm trying to teach them what I learned too late," she said. When we finally said goodbye, she reached out and hugged me. Not the kind of hug that says "I miss you," but one that says "thank you for being part of my growth." As she walked away, I realized that life had come full circle. The girl who once embarrassed me in front of my parents had become a woman who now understood what kindness, humility, and respect really meant. And me? I wasn't the heartbroken guy she left behind. I was the man who had built something stronger from the pieces she broke. That night, I sat on my balcony again, the same spot where I once read her apology message years ago. The city lights flickered below, and the wind carried the faint hum of traffic. I took a deep breath and smiled to myself. Sometimes karma doesn't arrive to destroy someone. Madison didn't come back to ask for forgiveness. She came back to close the story the right way. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something rare, gratitude not just for how things ended, but for how they began. Because if she hadn't laughed that night at my family dinner, I might have never learned how powerful silence, self-worth, and grace truly are.